these glass ceilings need to be gotten rid of on all of these cabinet posts. So there's no doubt that we're going to see a lot of that stuff shattered. But I think it is also going to be about finding that balance and being responsive to the electorate as a whole.
I do think that there is going to be a significant focus on, Chuck, I think you were suggesting the diversity of Joe Biden's cabinet. I think that is one thing that Democrats on Capitol Hill, but also across the country, they're looking to see themselves represented.
You probably have a woman defense secretary, Michelle Flournoy.
And possibly
she worked in the
first
Pentagon
woman
in the Obama administration.
Possibly the first woman Treasury Secretary, the first woman Defense Secretary. Sort of these last sort of, for some reason, relics, if you will, and just that stuff. And by the way, you shatter that stuff, and at the same time, you can still strike your ideological balance. And that's what he's going to have to do. It's not going to be easy, and he's going to have to strike this balance. But he does have in the same way Barack Obama was able to strike that balance when he came in, because he had a crisis immediately. And it was sort of like, look, you may have your issue that you really want. Come on, you've got to appoint this person, the deputy undersecretary of X. You're like, we don't have time for that right now. This time it's a pandemic. We don't have time for the little fights. And I think that also will benefit Joe Biden's ability to get the first cabinet that he wants, put it that way.
We're showing you images that are coming into our newsroom from around the country, from Lafayette Park in Washington, D.C., and Harrisburg in Pennsylvania. Those are some Trump supporters, and we'll continue to monitor those images. Let's go to Kristen Walker. She's at Biden headquarters getting reaction. And we mentioned, Kristen, already that Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, has reached out to Joe Biden, the president-elect. What else are you hearing?
Let me read you what we're hearing from Justin Trudeau, and then let's talk about the broader context of how the world is reacting, Savannah. Justin Trudeau writes, congratulations, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Our two countries are close friends, partners, and allies. We share a relationship that's unique on the world stage. I'm really looking forward to working together and building on that with both of you. Look, President Trump was someone who ran on an America First foreign policy, and that is how he governed. And so some of America's traditional relationships with its foreign allies have been strained throughout the Trump administration, something that he would acknowledge and felt quite proud of. Frankly, he pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement. He pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. These are things that Joe Biden has said he wants to rejoin. He said he wants to negotiate a better Iran nuclear deal. But just to give you a sense, and think about NATO. President Trump had a number of NATO summits which were quite tense at times. You'll recall that one moment where you had several world leaders who were talking about the president behind his back, mocking him. That was caught on camera. And that was something that, from the perspective of President Trump, he saw as a badge of honor. He would argue, look, he forced those NATO member countries to meet their commitments when it comes to foreign defense spending. But on the other hand, his critics would argue that some of America's most traditional relationships have been strained, and that has been a challenge for America's strength on the world stage. And at the same time, embracing some of America's foes, or those with whom America has had strained relationships with, like Vladimir Putin, like Kim Jong-un. Now, Biden has said, if you want to take North Korea as an example, that he would not meet with Kim Jong-un without preconditions. President Trump has met with Kim Jong-un 3 times, and still no nuclear deal, still no agreement for nuclear disarmament on the part of North Korea. So I think you are going to see a very different relationship with America on the world stage than we have seen in the past 4 years. It will be up to the historians to determine how that plays out. But Joe Biden has been very clear. He sees this very differently. He sees America's place on the world stage very differently. He does not subscribe to the America First foreign policy. I also want to make one more note, which is that Joe Biden has changed his Twitter handle. It now says President-elect, guys.
All right, Kristen, thank you. Let's go to Hallie Jackson now at the White House. Are you hearing any reaction from those in the president's inner circle, Hallie?
We are this afternoon, Lester. And a couple of things here. It has largely, I will tell you, been radio silence at this point. I think that I get the sense people are reeling from what I think folks knew was coming, but it is still the reality that they are now facing, save for 2 things, right? One, that inflammatory and misleading statement put out by the president this morning. The other, a press conference happening right now as we speak, actually up in Philadelphia, up in Pennsylvania, where the president's advisors are making baseless claims of fraud and and continue to do so, with, interestingly, Rudy Giuliani confirming now what we have been reporting for the past 24 hours, that the president is not going to concede with this legal fight now ongoing. I have to tell you, though, there are others who get where we are right now, who understand where the Trump White House is. One person close to the White House called this the great anticlimactic ending that folks have been seeing for several days. The focus now is really shifting to people thinking about themselves, their own futures, with a White House official telling us that a lot of people are coming to terms with this. They're starting to think through the transition, where they're going to go starting in January. And a senior campaign aide lets our team know, too, that there is still some work to do. As we've been talking about, and as you've been talking about there on set, the question is, how does this transition look for President Trump? He is likely, based on my experience in the last 5 years covering him from Inauguration Day in 2017, he's likely to fume. He is likely to continue to push conspiracy theories about the election results. It may be a turbulent couple of months here. I will tell you, too, Lester, right when the race was called by NBC News and other outlets, you couldn't hear what was happening on Black Lives Matter Plaza on the park just outside of the White House where I am. You can sure hear it now. We have been hearing more honking, more air horns, more cheering. It is a loud situation. The president this is the scene. You can see actually it's filled up. And just to give you some perspective, on the top of your screen, you can see there's a fence and then a grassy area. That's Lafayette Park, which is just to the north of where I'm standing at the White House. It has been barricaded. The gates and the fencing have been put up, non-scalable, officials say, because of the expectation that this would exactly be the scene on election night. We had to wait 5 days for that, right? Took a while to get here, but this is why the reinforcements have been put in place around the White House, because of the expectation of potentially protests or demonstrations like the sort of celebration that we are seeing right now. At some point, the president's going to come back to the White House, Lester. He's at the golf course now. That's just across the Potomac River in Virginia. He didn't take the helicopter. He doesn't do that since it's such a close trip. He drives through the streets in his motorcade, and he will have to motorcade back through the streets of Washington with this scene visible to him. This is not a president who often gets glimpses of life outside the bubble, so to speak. He confronted that a couple of times recently. I'm thinking most notably over at the Supreme Court after the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when people booed he and the First Lady when the two of them showed up after Justice Ginsburg was laid to rest in her there at the Supreme Court. But it is going to be, I think, a real potentially jarring moment for President Trump to see how the country is reacting to his loss as he continues to strike, frankly, this very defiant tone.
All right, Hallie, thanks very much. I just want to show you a picture that we're just getting in of Kamala Harris and her husband, Doug Emhoff. This is obviously reacting to the news, so picture we wanted to share.
The first Jewish
second
vice presidential spouse.
Second gentleman.
Okay, that's right. First second gentleman. Say that real fast. First second gentleman. I was glad to see so many Washingtonians out there wearing the mask.
Wearing masks.
And peaceful.
And,
I mean,
but this is a happy time.
By the way, we saw.
Be a gracious winner. Be good winners.
And by the way, we saw the crowds in Harrisburg, the Trump supporters, also peaceful. So that is what we had all hoped for.
Yep, to protest is as American as you can get. To hate each other is not.
Look,
and I think that's what we need to remember as these days unfold.
It is interesting. We polled this to see how would the supporters of either side handle losing. And what was interesting is that it was the Democratic side that their side lost. The first emotion they told our pollsters was anger. On the Trump side of things, believe it or not, his base, the first emotion they said they would feel if Trump lost was disappointment. And the point is this: you do get that sometimes, which is you're more angry at something that you couldn't attain. You may be more disappointed at something you've had and then lost. So there is, I am very hopeful and optimistic that for the most part there is going to be détente.
Let's talk to Casey about what's happening on Capitol Hill and in particular what Republicans are saying either behind the scenes or what you're getting from your sources about this moment, this time before the president is willing to concede, but after the race has definitively been called. for Joe Biden.
This is going to be, I think, a tenuous and potentially a difficult period, depending on how the president handles it for a lot of Republicans. We have not heard very much yet. I've been sitting here scanning through email looking for statements coming in from Republicans or tweets. We have not yet heard very much. We had a call from Justin Trudeau. I'm looking to see if we're going to get news of a Biden call with Mitch McConnell. So far, nothing along those lines. So I do think that they are going to face a reckoning with this president, and how they respond to what he does in this period is going to be pretty critical. We're also,
Casey, I'll give you a John Cornyn response.
Republican
Literally,
senator
Are you
from
talking about
Texas.
the Georgia Senate
Yes,
races?
the first thing what was submitted by any Republican senator right after the call, John Cornyn on Georgia, Democratic majority in the Senate would cinch the radical agenda of the left. They must be stopped on January 5th in Georgia. The point is that is the way that some elected Republicans will be able to sort of straddle the Trump base, who may have some anger about them, and working with a Biden administration and accepting the fact that that is what's coming. They concentrate their efforts on the political
They can
fight.
sort of move past
exactly, and
Donald
this is
Trump,
this is sort of President Trump's problem here. If he wants the party to rally around him to contest this, the rest of the party is going to move on to say, no. We want to make sure we have divided government over here.
And for those folks who may not have been following every single twist and turn,
Although
the
I think the
presidency
people-
has been decided. Obviously, Joe Biden is the president-elect. In the Senate, we still don't know who will control the Senate. Will it be Republicans or will it be Democrats? And it may well hinge on a couple of very tight Senate races in Georgia that are headed to runoffs.
Yep.
And that is why we're talking about this period not only being a lame duck period for the president and a period of transition for Joe Biden, it is also an extended election campaign with no less than the control of the United States Senate at issue down in Georgia.
Right. And, we shorthand it as control of the Senate, but here's what it really means. It's the difference between Joe Biden having a mandate for calm and normalcy, which it's very clear he already has, and perhaps a return to the status quo, and him being able to implement sweeping, big policy changes. And also, it's going to have a huge impact on how he is able to govern, whether the cabinet that he can get is the one that he wants. Because if Mitch McConnell is still controlling the Senate, remember, they have gotten rid of, in recent years, the filibuster. Now, what does that mean? It means they only need 51 votes for this. And so Republicans would be able to block, with their majority, Joe Biden's cabinet nominees, any future Supreme Court nominees. So what Democrats are looking for here is they're looking to see, is Mitch McConnell going to blockade all of that? Because Joe Biden's first 2 years as president look very, very different if Republicans control the Senate than they do if Democrats are going to be able to pull out these two races in Georgia. So we are all going to be focused on that for the next couple of months. And Republicans, you can already see them, Chuck, to your point, they're saying, if this is a radical administration, we got to put a check on this radical left. That also, I think, is going to be something that the Biden team is thinking about. They're not going to want to give any indications. They're going to want to protect themselves from that accusation in the next 2 months.
And let me just say, as Casey, you know so well, Joe Biden lived through that first couple of years as vice president with Mitch McConnell. On day one, there's an anecdote very widely reported, which is accurate, of that meeting that they had in the Capitol Grill and the determination to block everything that the Obama-Biden team did from day one. And they were successful. And we saw it most recently, played out, of course, in Supreme Court confirmations. But it was from day one, everything was a struggle. Joe Biden knows very well the difference between control of the Senate.
He does. I will also say, though, that Mitch McConnell has a lot on the line here. If he does control the Senate, he is going to need to hang on to it, and that may mean he's incentivized to do
By the way,
deals.
it's a narrow majority no matter what. Okay?
Yeah.
And so let's not forget that. And you're going to have Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins immediately be three people who want to work with the Biden administration and get caught working with the Biden administration.
I want to go to a presidential historian, author, and NBC News contributor, John Meacham, who joins us now. John, we have seen changes of party and power in the White House, but this is a change of tone. It's a change of temperament, not only literally, but certainly in perception. Have we been down a road like this, quite like this before?
I think this election will ultimately rank with 1860 and 1864, where Lincoln was elected and reelected. It's certainly like 1932, when the tone of the country changed like this, from the dour Herbert Hoover to the jaunty and confident Franklin Roosevelt. This is a moment not unlike 1960, when President Kennedy brought in a new generation with, by the way, a much smaller majority than a President Biden will now have. Character is destiny, and it's both the character of the president and the character of all of us. And in many ways, the presidency is a tension between being a maker of our character and a mirror of it. And what I think a lot of us are hoping today is that Biden's victory is a mirror of at least a 51% win for what Lincoln called our better angels versus our worst instincts. And that's what history is. It's a push and a pull. And I think that in many ways, for a lot of the reasons that you all are talking about, Joe Biden may be the perfect man for this moment. Because I've got Springer Spaniels who are more radical than Joe Biden. That's just not who he is. And so it's not going to be this socialist swerve. And I know we're going to be divided. I know the partisanship is going to be sulfurous, but it can't be as sulfurous as it has been. And I believe ultimately, Benjamin Franklin left the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. Well, important woman said, well, Mr. Franklin, Dr. Franklin, what have you given us, a monarchy or a republic? And he said, a republic, madam, if you can keep it. And I think we kept it with this election.
I'm just thinking about Twitter. We've had for 4 years a president that communicates primarily through Twitter. How will it be with Joe Biden?
Not that way.
I will just say normal.
He won't fire his Secretary of State or Defense on Twitter.
Let me ask you, John, because you not only are a historian, but I know you're a man of deep faith. This is a moment where a nation needs healing. And how do you think Joe Biden sets about that most important work?
So important. The Bible says to everything there's a season, a time to reap, a time to sow, a time to tear down, a time to build, and a time to heal. And healing is not something that just comes out of the blue, right? You can't just say, oh, I'm going to heal. And I think this is why Biden's character is particularly apropos here and fitting, because healing begins with a recognition of the other person's position, of why the wounds are here. What is it that's been off in our national life, in our place in the global world, in our hopes for the future and our fears and anxieties about it? And Biden gets that, right? This is not a blue state president. I know it feels that way sometimes, but this is a guy from Scranton. Labor unions, it means a lot to him that the folks he grew up with still get him, and he wants to get them. And so I think if we can get to more of a conversation than a constant machinery of conflict, I think that's where some healing can begin.
John Meacham.
That work begins today.
Thank you. Again, NBC News projects that Joe Biden is now president-elect of the United States. Kamala Harris is vice president-elect as they pass the 270 electoral vote threshold.
This has been a moment of democracy in action. More people have voted this year than in a generation, even during a pandemic, even at a moment of great division in this country. Democracy is still with us, and we are watching its fruits as we speak. We will come back on the air as events warrant. For now, for everyone here at NBC News, thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing this moment with us, and we will see you soon.
Remember that deep breath moment I spoke of on election eve? Maybe you could begin to let it out. No, this isn't over yet, but the votes are being counted. Not as fast as we want, but democracy is working. We're proving once again that it is our voices that count.
White sandy beaches, crystal blue water. How incredible is that? We only get one shot at making the first impression. We're here to work, or you will be gone. High maintenance charter guest.
This crew needs to step it up.
New crew, perfect storm.
This is not open!
Get back to this boat now. Suck it up, cream puff.
Set your DVR to watch new episodes of Bravo's Below Deck every Monday after 9.
Watching NBC News Now. We've got some breaking news.
Are people there concerned about what impact this could have on the election?
It's news made for your streaming world.
For breaking news in our changing world, download the NBC News app.
I didn't know, was my child dead? Was my child passed out?
I just kept saying, please be okay, please be okay.
You rush your child to the hospital.
A woman came in, normal clothes. We get down the hallway, she closes the door. They were accusing me of child abuse.
And that's when the real nightmare begins.
Hey, calm down.
No, it's my children. I can't calm down.
Do No Harm, a new podcast series from NBC News and Wondery. First 2 episodes available Tuesday. Subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts.
I wore my snowshoes.
Hashtag blessed on that one.
I'm a purebred Mormon.
I'm Pentecostal.
It is a very big deal that I'm no longer Mormon. I was raised Mormon, but I'm converting to Islam.
Assalamu alaikum, bitches.
Perfection is attainable.
She's a bitch.
Go away.
Amen.
The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City premieres Wednesday at 10, only on Bravo. Set your DVR.
Today, Lester Holt and Savannah Guthrie in New York, the moment the entire country has been waiting for after a very close race. NBC News now projects that Joe Biden has won the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, and its 20 electoral votes.
And that means we can now project that former Vice President Joe Biden has been elected President of the United States. He is President-elect Joseph Robinette Biden at 77 years old. Chuck, we'll turn to you. This map is a real interesting one, not necessarily the path that anyone thought would have unfolded, but here we are.
Here we are. Look, we got just enough vote in order to call Pennsylvania, even if it may slip into a recount. We think there's just the mathematically nearly impossible for the order of finish to change in Pennsylvania. And when you look at it in many ways, Joe Biden won with a somewhat traditional map in the Midwest. He rebuilt the blue wall. And narrowly, but he did it. He added 2 sort of expansion states that looks like, potentially, when all's said and done, with Arizona and Georgia. But the fact is, he did it without it. And it proved that 4 years ago, the biggest important lesson from this election is that 2016 was not an outlier. This is essentially the 2016 election with the Gary Johnson vote going to Joe Biden. And here we are.
All right, Andrea.
I'm thinking of the 32-year quest for the presidency of this man. His resilience in the face of failed attempts in the past, a very slow start, stumbling out of the gate, losing the primaries and caucuses, reclaiming it on Super Tuesday, and taking a centrist message, which will now challenge him. His ability to reach across the aisle will be challenged on the left within the Democratic Party. But the empathy, the fact that he was so policy-directed, which comes from his whole career during COVID, which I think was the biggest story of this closing part of the campaign, his response to the pandemic and to the racial inequality, the protests after George Floyd, really spelled that appeal to suburban women and others in broadening that appeal that Hillary Clinton simply could not reach in the 2016 map. And that spelled victory in a sharp contrast with appealing for unity, for calm, as he has in the last 48 hours.
And Casey Hunt is here. Concession is normally the opening to transition. Are we going to see that?
I think we're all going to be watching to see what Republicans do here, and they have a real challenge in trying to manage a president who has been ruled, it seems, by his emotions and who has fed into the chaos. So I would expect some Republicans to focus on letting what Chuck mentioned. There's still going to be a process that plays out in the states. Obviously, Republicans have talked about legal challenges. I'm going to watch to see how long and how far Republicans are going to be willing to entertain that. Clearly, current President Trump has a lot of support. There were a lot of Americans who voted for him here, but I'm not sure that there's going to be sustained support for that. And, you know, just to pick up on what Andrea was saying, I've been watching all of this, and you think about what got Joe Biden into this race and how, you know, everyone in Washington has looked at this president. He has said repeatedly that the events in Charlottesville and the president's unwillingness to be very clear on matters of race are what got him into this in the beginning, that he was something of a reluctant candidate, that his son Beau should have been the one who was running here. I mean, he has been trying, as Andrea said, to find his way into this office for decades. And that the relationships that he did build through the roles that he had in the Senate, I think, are going to drive us going forward.
You know, there's a mandate. There is a mandate here. And there's going to be a fight about what it is. But I'll tell you what the American people's mandate is. Heal the nation. That's Joe Biden's mandate. That's the message that was sent. Heal the nation. It's why he ran. And you know what? That is why he ran.
And in those closing days, Joe Biden would often say, this is a fight for the soul of the nation. And the nation has spoken. If you're just tuning in, NBC News projects that Joe Biden will be the 46th president of the United States. Let's go to Kristen Welker. She's at Biden headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware. Kristen, good morning.
Savannah and Lester, good morning to both of you on this historic day. The Biden campaign has been elated since yesterday when Joe Biden pulled ahead in Pennsylvania, and now there is cause for real celebration. We are out to the campaign for reaction, none yet, but I can tell you that they have been planning for the vice president to address the nation. They have been confident that this was the news that is coming, and so what will his message be? It speaks to some of those key points that Andrea and Casey just talked about. Biden knows that his first and biggest challenge is going to be to try to speak to this entire nation, to all of those people who voted for President Trump, to try to unify the country. And so I am told that's going to be the theme of his message when he does, in fact, address the nation. That could happen as early as this evening. He will talk about the fact that he sees himself as a president of the entire nation and not just blue states, the people who voted for him. And that's really been a theme that has governed much of his campaign. It's something we've heard quite a lot about in these closing days. When you look at Pennsylvania, the state that delivered him this victory, where did he spend most of his time campaigning in the closing days of this campaign? It was Pennsylvania, 14 stops in all, more than any other state. Why? Because he knew that this could be the state that could be make or break for him. And so it was, and so it is.